Welcome to the Process Podcast.
From new agent to broker owner.
My name is Travis McClure. This is my co-host, Preston Guyton. Welcome to the Process Podcast. This is Travis McClure, and I got a special guest, and I consider co-host with me today. His name is Jason Wojo. He's from the Wake Forest, North Carolina area. He's the CEO of a great company called Lifeonaire. And from there, Jason, I'm going to throw this over to you. Introduce yourself, tell us about yourself, and tell us what Lifeonaire is.
Dude, yeah, man. First of all, Travis, thank you for having me. And I love it. For those of you who are listening, it takes a lot of work to put on a great podcast, and these guys are, and Travis and his team are here to give you guys information that can help you in your life and your business. And essentially, that's really what Lifeonaire is about. Like, so I didn't have any entrepreneurs, any business owners in my family or extended family. So I thought my only option was to get a job. So I go to school all this time, a long time, went to school, get my very first job, and then actually found out that I hated working for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And actually my real estate license was one of the first things I got right out of that. And then from there I became a broker in charge here in North Carolina. We call it a BIC. And so what that did was it was my first kind of like foray into working for myself. Now, the problem I had and what Lifeonaire is so passionate about is like, I started that business, and then I started my flipping business. I had a health business, and all of a sudden I'm working all the time. And, none of the businesses are quite doing what I knew they were capable of. They were okay. They were getting by, but more than anything, I was just working all the time. And I never, until I got to Lifeonaire, realized like, hey, working for yourself is great. And I think the most common reason people go into business for themselves is so they can have freedom. But what I see and what I was experiencing at that point in time was like, man, I have less freedom now than when I had a job. Like, my income is up and down, and yeah, there's great paydays, and there's droughts, and more than anything though, like my time was being sacrificed, and I wasn't able to kind of pursue the personal life that I wanted. And every part of my life, like my relationships were suffering, my health was suffering. And so Lifeonaire, I actually started off as a student back in 2009, became CEO, and I became a coach for them 4 years later. Then I started running the company in 2016. And so they are I want to credit like Lifeonaire really is the people who straightened me out.
Mm-hmm.
And now I get to do that for other people. And so like our whole thing, if I had to summarize what Lifeonaire does, it's all about like, let's help you figure out exactly what you want your life to look like in every single area. And then, and only then, let's talk about business. Let's talk about money. Let's talk about how to support that lifestyle financially. Because they have to, like, this is the part that everybody misses, is like, they have to fit together. Like you need money. I of course, like, it's not a pie in the sky approach to living where like, we're just going to pretend everything's great.
Right.
You need money, you need finances for choices, but like, you have to do it in a way that doesn't completely like destroy your life in the process. And so that's really what we're passionate about, is like integrating both life and business in a way that allows you to have both. I think so many people think that like you only have to pick one, and you're either going to be a rock star business owner, but you have to be willing to sacrifice everything else in your life. I don't think that's true, man. I think it's a false choice that people just don't know that you can do both. Right. And so that's what we're all about. That's what I'm passionate about. I love this message. And I love seeing people's like perspective of what's possible to change once they kind of learn how to do it. Cause it's not even that hard really.
Right. Yeah. And I was telling you kind of before we started the episode, the more and more of your content I found and started watching, I picked up right away we were like-minded, because here at Pops and Easy, when we bring agents on, Jason, I always talk to agents a little bit when they first get here, and we talk about, what is it you're trying to achieve in life, and then what type of business do you need to make that happen? And I call it the passion link, because you achieve this in business, you're able to get this in life. And I heard you say in one of your podcast episodes is you have to put your vision first and then build a business around it. Why is that so important?
Man, it's so true. And actually, and to the point you just said, where you ask new agents what they want, you got to make sure if you're that agent, if you're that person being asked that question, you have to say what you really want. Like, because I know like early on for me, I'd say what I thought my boss wanted to hear, or my, like, oh, I want to like, and I would give the answer that I thought they wanted rather than what I wanted for myself. And so this is where your vision becomes so important is you really got to figure out for yourself, not what, you know, listen, all of us love acknowledgement and appreciation and getting pats on the back, but you got to pick what you want to do. And once you identify that and once you know what you want your life to look like, now you can create a business. Because here's the thing too, is like, so let's say you create a vision, and one of the parts of a vision is like, hey, what does my schedule look like? What's an ideal calendar for me? And let's say you discover that you only have 20 hours left a week for work if you're going to live your vision and have the business. Well, that's going to really impact how you set up your business, what you do in your business, your processes and things you put into place. And so they tie into each other. And the other part of your vision is like, you might go down your list of everything you want in your life, and you're going to discover how much it costs you. Maybe you have a ballpark estimate of what this is going to need financially to live all this stuff. Well, guess what? You need that information for your business too.
Mhm.
Because the other thing I see, I was just interviewed on a podcast. They work with 7, 8, 9 figure business owners, and the one thing that we both discussed is like sometimes we see business owners that worked so far past the solution. Here they are, yeah, okay, you're great, you're making $4 million a year, but your vision requires $200,000 a year, and you're complaining that you have no time and you're stressed out. Well, you passed the answer. It was back on the interstate, 4 exits ago.
Right.
And now your ego's in control. And like, you just, so that's why I think it's just so important for those to integrate.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. I think that's an interesting topic for a lot of agents as they grow their business. I was coaching with some agents this morning, and they're single agents, but they're in the process of growing their business to the point where they're adding some leverage, right? Adding people to help
Mhm.
them, that kind of thing. And the point of leverage really should bring you either more time or more money or both.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that you say that because a lot of agents will grow their business and not add leverage, but they've grown this business that's become kind of a monster to their lives, right? And real estate's a business that really can do that very easily for a single agent if you don't, tap into some resources like a Lifeonaire, a mentor, a coach to help you kind of add the leverage to your business so you can enjoy life, right? You can only make so much money to a point where it's kind of taken over.
Man, it's interesting you say that because like, and I think is in agents in particular, from my experience and maybe yours as well, like they're very vulnerable to thinking that they have to do everything in the business.
Yes.
And as a broker myself, I understand there are regulations and legalities that you have to pay attention to. There's only certain things you can give to other people. However, to your point, like if you know that, let's say your vision has you making X amount of money and you can handle that as an agent on your own, and it's going to still allow you to have the life and business you want, then great. But at some point, I think agents somehow get sucked into this cycle of number one, there's a lot of, I think, fear in agents sometimes, like, hey, the market's going to change. I need to make hay while the sun is shining, or hey, I got a referral here, and I need to take this because if I say no to this one, then I might not get the next one. And there's all these reasons to take more and more and more business.
Yes.
And so I've seen agents, and I was just talking with an agent. She's a top 10 in North Carolina for volume, and she's literally a one woman show. She doesn't have a team. Everybody else in that category has a team, and she's doing it all herself. And she is burning that candle at both ends, man. And it's
Right.
not sustainable. And so you gotta really, and this is something I know agents especially like are like, hey, they're buying me, they want me, they want the, well, maybe there's certain things you should do, but there's other things like you have to learn how to build a team around you that you are proud of and that reflect your brand integrity and the kind of person and business you want to represent. And once you do that, like I think it's a short-term thinking to try to do it all yourself. Because the other thing, man, that we talk a lot about in Lifeonaire is like, and this is agents have to think about this as well, is like building redundancy into your business. Because I got a buddy, this is a sad story, but I have a buddy, Russ. He's in real estate. He ended up, this has been 6 years ago now, got a brain tumor, and he's fine. Well, he's not fine now. He's had it removed, but he's not fully mentally there. He's not fully capable of the workload he could do before. He can't think as clearly as he could before, and he's working his way back. However, the one thing he said to me is like, man, the one thing I should have done is created a business that doesn't completely rely on me,
Yeah.
because like once that stops, then everything, the buck stops, and agents can be really vulnerable to that. And so you got to think in terms of like a business that you can, take, and it's not just for like when something goes wrong, but like you're going to want to take vacations. You want to spend time with your family and do the fun
Right.
stuff too, right? Like that's why we do this.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And I love that you said like redundancy, and I've used that as like something that's systematic, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you're an agent, you listen to this, you're only so many hours a week can be invested in your business by you, whether it's 30 because you're a single parent, or 40, or 50, or God forbid you work 60 hours a week. There's a cap there somewhere. And if
Yeah.
you add an assistant, or I know admins, right, or a virtual assistant become a very popular thing in the industry, where maybe they take on 20 hours a week of things you normally do. Well, now instead of being a 40-hour a week agent, now you're a 60-hour a week, right? Because you're able to invest that time somewhere else. Is that the kind of stuff you guys consult around in life?
Yeah, that's a big thing, man. And you said something that also reminds me of this is like, so often we're so, especially when it comes to like, I think as a whole, most people are a little bit more, at least our generation is a little bit more comfortable with technology than they are people. But as
Yeah,
soon as you mention bringing in a person, oh, nobody works like I do, nobody cares about business like I do. I've heard all the excuses.
yeah,
But here's the thing you got to realize, like at some point, let's say you are a single agent, you have a capacity to do a great job up to a certain point, and then at some point you're going to start dropping balls.
yep,
You're going to miss phone calls, you're going to miss emails, you're going to forget an appointment, you're going to forget to schedule an inspection, or something's going to happen where the quality of your work and your service will deteriorate. It will. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's just where. And so let's say you get somebody that's only 80% or 70% or 60% as good as you, but it's not something that's going to affect the business in a huge way. Well, that 60 or 80% is better than 0% because you didn't get it done because you were too busy. And so like finding those small areas that you feel safe to explore, to hire to people, something that's not going to destroy your business or your reputation. Like you got to start that process, because here's the other thing that this is probably one of the most powerful lessons I learned when I started doing this is like, just because I'm good at it does not mean I'm good at hiring somebody else and training and managing and overseeing them to do it.
yeah.
And so like I somehow figured like, oh, I'm really good at this. Like I can get somebody who I can show them what I do. It's a completely different skill set. So you got to learn that. And so start soon. You're not just going to hand over the keys of the city all at once. You're going to, give them like a little bit of rope and see how they do with it. But you have to do that if you're going to build a business.
Jason, you guys consult more businesses than just real estate agents, right? Like
Oh
more
yeah, yeah. Most, and in fact, yeah, agents are only a portion of what we do. I'd say most people that we deal with, well, most people are either, I'd say we're 70 to 80% real estate investors, and then the other 30% is probably made up of like real estate agents, small business owners. We have brick and mortar. We have people that have radon companies that have. We have a guy in California who has a $10 million agricultural business. Like it's all over the board. Because here's the thing too: is like all businesses share 95% of the same challenges. They just manifest themselves in different ways. And so there's a lot of like cross pollination between businesses that we just can apply to regardless of what the industry we're talking about is.
Yeah, I love that. Let's say I am and a lot of our audience is team leads, broker owners, and
Yep.
and real estate agents. Let's say I am an agent and I'm listening to this single agent. And the question I hear a lot, agents say, well, how do I know when I should hire someone? And who do I hire first? Because I think there's a lot of mistakes made around that, in my opinion. And I'll share mine, but you go first. Like where
Yeah,
should
man.
agents start? They're gonna add some leverage, they're gonna hire somebody.
So I think, let's say you're a single agent. So first of all, you need to, I feel like there's one of two ways to do this. One is like you got to get pretty good at your job first, so you even know where to hire somebody and where your balls are being dropped, or you talk to somebody who's more experienced, like yourself, or somebody who's already kind of gone through this and say, hey, here's where I am right now, based on what you see in my trajectory. What do you think? Like, what did you do, and would you do the same thing? So I think one of the things I'm really a big fan of is modeling other successful people. And in fact, man, I'm not too ashamed to admit this. Like I attribute my success to the people I was around. It wasn't
Sure.
me, dude. There's nothing,
Same here.
trust me. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, being around the smart people, like you learn. And like,
Yeah.
so don't try to reinvent the wheel. Like see what other people have done. Um, that's huge.
Yeah, I can agree with that more. I always kid and say I've never been the smartest guy in the room. I've just been smart enough to pay attention to the smartest guy in the room.
Dude, that's so true.
I have two philosophies around hiring, Jason. I love to bounce them off you. Number one is like we're a growing company, right? We always hire two ways. Number one, we hire to where we see our company growing, not where we're
Mhm.
at.
Yep.
Like we hire ahead of that. Like we know what our growth projection is over the next 6 months in this company. And we've recently hired two staff members to accommodate where we're going. The other thing we hire to is what we're not good at. Like,
Yes.
like for example, I'm terrible when it comes to like social media marketing, that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna hire talent around me that's great at that. What are your thoughts around that type of hiring?
So I think so first of all, I totally agree with like hiring what you're not good at or you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that's important as a business owner or an agent, and an agent is a business owner, but your business could be you right now, but you got to realize that there are certain activities in your business that produce a higher dollar return for that activity than others. And so, for instance, like sending an email or filling out an agreement or doing some paperwork, maybe you can hire somebody for 20 or $30 an hour, but talking with a potential seller or buyer or getting meeting across the table from a prospect could produce a much higher result. And so as I think you got to be careful to look at where you're spending your time, because if you were to track and this is something that nobody wants to do, but once they do it they're blown away, is like track your time. Like what are you actually spending time on in your business, and then assign a dollar value to what you think you could hire somebody to do that. And so what oftentimes we'll see is people are spending 80% of their time doing, ministerial or admin tasks that really are way below what they should be making.
Right.
And so that's one problem. But the actual problem here is that let's take all those hours off your plate. How much more money would you be able to make if you are focusing on high income activities during that time period? So you're actually costing yourself money. Like, so let's say that, if you're taking, let's say just for easy math, and by the way, like none of my degrees are in math, so I just use easy examples here. Let's say you're spending 20 hours a week doing $10, well, nothing's $10 anymore these days. Let's say you're $20 an hour for 20 hours per week. That's $400 per week, right? So you could say like, hey, I made myself, $400 worth of value. Or let's say you have another activity that's generating $100 per hour that you could be doing. And so therefore you would have $2,000 of value to your company. So you just cost your company $1,600, which was the difference between the 2,000 and the 400. And you add that $1,600 times 50 or 52 for the full year, and you see why people aren't making the money they need to make. And so hiring those things out, I think, is really, really valuable for a business owner. And to your point earlier about leverage and either having to add time or money or both, like that's exactly what that does. And
Right.
so those are the tasks that you should think about getting off your plate sooner rather than later.
Something interesting I've heard you talk about in a few of your podcasts, and Preston and I have talked about it on this show before too. Really thinking about like an agent getting into this business, and there's usually a lot of signs of people who are highly successful, and a lot of signs of people, agents that struggle. Right? You got to think the success rate for a brand new agent in this industry a year ago was like 12%. Now it's even harder. Right? The market has shifted. It's a harder.
Yeah.
And I've seen where you've talked about, you actually posed the question, can I live my vision and still keep my day job or my part-time job? And I think it's really difficult to start a real estate career, start a business. Not impossible. People have done it, but also, doing it part-time and have this other job on the side. Talk about that and your thoughts around that. Like, and
Yeah.
can you have your vision and still have a part-time job somewhere else or a full-time job somewhere else?
Well, most people's vision, not everybody, has them working 20 or 30 hours a week max.
Sure.
before it starts to crimp on what they want to do. That's not everybody though, so that's why I'm hesitant to say that. And many people have jobs that require them to either be in the office or work hours they don't want to work, and so anytime you have an obligation not set by you, that's going to influence your ability to live your vision, and so what that looks like. And so as it pertains to like to agents, um I think well, I'll tell you, one of the things I hear from agents as a challenge when it comes to living their vision is like, hey, I'm kind of at the mercy of my clients, like in
Right.
their schedule. And so, they have a full-time job and they want to meet me at 6 p.m. and that's my time with my kids,
Yeah.
and so that is a real challenge. And so that is where I think, finding those opportunities to at least clear out your schedule for the things you can. And I think every business, not every, most businesses have some degree of that. Um, but I think you got to really balance that with like what is that worth to you? Of course, like as an agent, you're going to try to get a listing rather than a buyer many times because it's a little bit easier. You just get that listing once and things are, and it's not to say that it's done for you. It's not, there's still work involved, but
Yeah.
it could be, driving a buyer around to 25 houses and submitting multiple contracts. However, maybe that's part of your business that you're like, hey, you know what? I just want to be a listing agent. You don't say yes to everybody to give you a little bit of that flexibility. Um, and so to your question, like, was your question also saying like, hey, can an agent be a part-time agent, be successful and have a full-time job?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Man, it's, I wouldn't say it's impossible. I think at some point you would, it's the challenge with that is your availability, because if you have a full-time job, let's say, and your agency stuff, well, where's your life going to go, and are you available for your clients? Now with that, I'll give a caveat. Like, I am not the kind of guy, even when I left my full-time job and my first business, the was not my the business that got me out of my job was not being a real estate agent. That was nice gravy, but it was the real estate investing. And so I was the agent on my own deals as well as a couple other ones, but I wasn't making enough money within that first year to justify walking away.
Mhm.
So I did do both.
Right.
And actually I did all three. There was a cost to that though. There was a real cost, man. And so I think what you have to do is build up the confidence that like, hey, if I can make this work in a part-time time commitment, there's a really good chance I can make it when I went full time. And so that's what I did with real estate. I'm like, if I can make this kind of money and I'm only working, roughly, 15, maybe 20 hours a week in the business, when I have all this time, I likely could be successful. So
Right.
at some point, I think you got to make that jump. Like, I don't think you can do both for very, very long. But I also understand people like having bills, and like, the
Yeah.
uncertainty of closing deals isn't 100% either.
It is scary. Like I always struggle with that too. And we hire agents here, Jason. Like we lean towards we hire full time agents. You know what I
You have
mean?
a
We have
better chance for success for sure.
much better chance. And like doing what I do and very similar to you, agents that go all in and have like I call it like they kind of burn the ships.
Yeah,
They have
yeah.
no choice but to be successful. They tend to be successful, right?
Yep.
Like they have families to feed, they have finance, they'll find a way to make it happen. The agents that have the fallback plan of that other job, they're kind of tethered to it. It's like they're always kind of grinding in and not always. There is some outliers to that for sure, but I'll say most of the time they tend to fall back to that other job.
Man, I think that's true. And I think, but and so if you're doing like, let's say you're brand new to as an agent, like if you do a couple deals and you have a full-time job, like you got to like get off the fence. Like,
Mhm.
I think you got to make a decision. Like, is this, because here's the other thing too, is I have seen agents that like have a very um, misguided understanding of what it's like to be an agent. And so this is where if you're someone who's new to be an agent, like again, we're getting back to before, talk to other agents, see what they do all day. Does that sound fun? Are they, are they talking to people, are they prospecting, are they in the MLS, are they doing marketing? Like find out what that's like so you can like get a good taste for it before you decide to jump ship. Because no business is for everybody. And so get a taste for that and see what it's like. And then that'll give you a good indicator of like, is this something I want to do?
Yeah. Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about the broker owner because I
Yeah.
think that's an interesting conversation too. So a lot of broker owners, when they or the team leads, they have a hard time. I've noticed in Preston, who's my normal co-host, he coaches a lot of broker owners and team leads. They have a really hard time shifting from the real estate business they run versus working with buyers and sellers, right? So, if they add an agent or they spend their time prospecting an agent, I think the stat is like over 5 years, that's $90,000 worth of profit versus how much will a listing bring you one time, and I think entrepreneurs in general, probably more your realm, is the mindset of working in their business instead of on their business, right?
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit because that's a really tough transition to make as well.
Man, and that happens in every business. Like, so, you see it, for instance, like you got the man or the woman who's the best salesman at the car lot, and all of a sudden they promote them to sales manager. And now they're not talking to any clients. They're trying to manage like cats and like, and it's they're basically taken out of their area of competency. When it comes to building a business though, and there's a book about this called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, who talks
Yes,
about this.
one of
Like,
my favorites.
man, and
Yeah,
it's so true, right? Like,
yeah,
so and so you're the person, you're the person who's think of it this way, like, you got your tribe of people, and you're the person who goes out and kills the food and brings it back. That's great, except you got a full tribe here. And if you're gonna run a community, you need to have people doing different things. And so you have to kind of graduate your thinking to realizing that the specific task that you used to be good at now can be scaled only when you take your skills and now pass those on. Now, how you this is like, for instance, John Maxwell talks about this a lot. John Maxwell, for those of you who don't know, is a very well known business leadership development guy. He's fantastic, and he says like the measure of a leader is your ability to create more leaders.
yep.
And so I think if you're a business owner, stepping out of the swinging the hammer role, or the active in the trenches work, is a requirement you have to wrap your mind around. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky though, man, because like sometimes, for instance, like one of the things in real estate, you're doing a rehab, you're doing a renovation, you're flipping a house. All the gurus will say never swing the hammer yourself because you're losing money. It'll take you longer. You hire a pro, hire an expert. You write the checks. The only problem I have with that though is like, well, what if I enjoy swinging the hammer and it's therapeutic for me, and
Sure.
I don't care about making the most money possible? Then maybe it's okay. But if your goal is to build a business, then you have to step into that role. There's no other alternative. Um, Ideally, you do it in a way that you could, if you wanted to, you could take on some. If you really get the itch, you could maybe take on a buyer or a seller. But ultimately, your highest and best use for that company, and the greatest reward, believe it or not, like give it some time, but your greatest reward is when you see other people succeed and you at a hand in that. And so I think as you develop the mindset to pour into people and to help them recognize their potential, like, and you see like somebody who's all of a sudden like, because you can only make so much money yourself before you're like, okay, this is like cool, but like it's another zero in my bank account. But when you see like that new agent who just like, got all these deals, and then now their family, they're buying a new house, and their families, and then they're provided for their family, like that gives you a real sense of like, of contribution and purpose. And so I think you got to wrap your mind around the difference, that it's a much more scalable skill. It's a much more powerful and important skill to building a business. You're helping more people, and if you're in real estate, for instance, because you truly want to help people find a quality home that they can live in for their family, and now you have 10 or 20 or 50 agents under you, you just reach that many more people, and that's the part that you should latch onto.
Right. I couldn't agree with that more, Jason. The other thing I came to mind when we were talking about swinging the hammer, and if that's something you enjoy, and it doesn't get in the way of, building the business. I think that's where, the very beginning of this conversation, we talked about vision. If
Yeah.
swinging the hammer hurt or get in the way of the vision that you're trying to achieve, then it's not worth it to swing the hammer.
Oh, totally true, man.
Yeah,
Totally true.
I think that's why it's so important to have that vision. And the way I view vision is like, it's like a compass. Is this the right thing for my business and my life? Whatever that vision is.
That's right, man. And you look at that and you're like, any decision you make, like, is this thing getting me closer to my vision or further away?
Right. Good stuff. Talk to us a little more about Lifeonaire. If someone is interested in what that is, or they want to get a hold of you, or they want that type of coaching for their business, how do they make that step, Jason?
Yeah, man. So the best thing to do is, so of course we have a website, lifeonaire.com. You can get an overview of there. The two things and the coaching is awesome. We have a coaching and mastermind program. It's unbelievable. But actually, believe it or not, I actually prefer that people, if they don't have to, but this is the path I've seen most valuable is, number one, get into we have a private Facebook group, and it's free. Anybody can join. It's not just for people like that are members. But after that, the next thing I prefer people to do is actually come out to one of our events. Like we have two events, and it's meant to be a combination because they're both important. One is called the Get a Life Getaway. And this is where we help people really, really very tangibly and clearly craft their vision. So we spend 3 days going through this. And believe it or not, a lot of that is deprogramming what you thought you wanted or somebody else told you wanted to figure out what you really want. We help you figure out how much money you need to make, how much time you have to live your vision. We help you figure out the action steps to do that. It's very tactical. It's very strategic. It's not just a high level. We really get in the weeds. And then the second event is called our Business Builder 3-day MBA workshop. And that's where we actually dive into the money equation. That's where we dive into, like, how do you actually run a business that doesn't require you? We have a patent pending process now called that we developed. It's called the SEED process, but it's spelled SEAD. It's like seed. And it stands for Strategic Elimination, Automation, and Delegation. And so it's a process to help people figure out, like, hey, let's get rid of stuff from the business first. Then we'll automate, technology through software, through tools, things like that. And then lastly is the delegation piece, which is the hardest for most people, which is like, how do you actually bring other people on that you feel good about, that you have confidence in, that can help you get to the place you want to be? And so, like, that's the Business Builder workshop. And that's an awesome event too. So like, we kind of have both of those. And those are the places that people really, like, oftentimes for the first time see like what they're capable of and what's possible.
Guys, have a great rest of your day. Have a great week. And we'll talk to you soon.